Hey, welcome to Board Gems. In this video, I just want to talk about two games that I've played recently. Simple as that. I just wanted to talk about two games that came out both same year. Both are simultaneous play polyomino games. They're both available on Board Game Arena if you want to play. I believe this one is available for everybody, and this one is just available for premium subscribers. And I both played them for the first time relatively recently, especially with my wife, and it's just something I wanted to just chat about because they are different. I do have different opinions on them, and I just want to kind of explore why I have a different opinion on them. But I'll just talk generally about them. First, I'll talk about Junk Drawer, which is from David Smith and 25th Century Games. In this game, each player has their personal board, which has 4 squares of 5 by 5 spaces each. And in the course of a game, and the game is short, the game is like 15-20 minutes, you will have these random goals that come out. They're public goals for everyone. So they're grouped by easy, medium, and hard. And there's one goal for each of your 4 squares, your 4 drawers, I suppose. You're flipping over a card. All the polyominoes are represented on card. You'll flip over a card and everybody grabs that polyomino and decides what to do with it. But for each group of 4 polyominoes, each polyomino has to go into a different drawer. So contributing toward a different goal. Then we flip over a second, get the polyomino shown, and then we decide which of the remaining 3 to put it on. So that 4th one has to go in the last remaining drawer. Then you sweep those aside and you'll do 4 new ones, and you'll keep going until one player can't play anymore, and then you evaluate the goals. So each player will get a score based on their 4 drawers, the 4 arrangements of the polyominoes in their 5 by 5 squares. The goals vary a bit. So some of the easy ones would be like 1 square for every space covered period, or on the edge or in the middle. But you'll see some of the harder ones are like, you'll get X number of points for having in each row and column exactly 2 squares covered. Or they'll say you get 3 points for every corner and the middle square for each one that's left uncovered. Or you'll get 3 points per gap, so for each unique group of empty spaces. So unlike a lot of polyomino games in which the priority is always to fit everything in as close as possible, there's some variety in Junk Drawer in that sometimes you do want to do that, but sometimes you want to leave open spaces. Like one goal is 1 point for every empty space in your largest group of empty spaces, or your second largest group of empty spaces. So you want to have 2 groups as large as possible in that latter example. And it can be hard to arrange that, right? If you don't want to necessarily compress all your polyominoes in as tight a space as possible, you might want, in that latter example I gave, to try to create 2, you want to create 2 groups of empty spaces. But how do you do that? You're not trying necessarily to squeeze them all in. Because the polyominoes range in size from large to small, what you can do is try to create these small spaces based on what you see is remaining and still to come up, that you know or hope that you won't draw a polyomino that fits in there. I'm leaving that drawer till last. It'll be the 4th one, and I just hope I draw a big one because that means that I won't be able to place it. And so as a result, the game will be over for everybody. And then I'll still be able to score that drawer, and hopefully it's a good score for me, right? Whereas if I get a smaller polyomino, maybe I don't want that because I am able to fit it in, and that'll make my empty group smaller. The tiles artistically are differentiated quite well. So each polyomino has a different junk that's represented on it. And these are represented well on the card, the same illustration. There's lots of space on the card. They could have put the shape of the polyomino on there as well, just to help you find it a little bit better. It's not really that much of a problem in practice. It's just a slight missed opportunity. It exercises a slightly different muscle to regular polyomino games, or what I would say a typical polyomino game, because you're not necessarily trying to squeeze things in as compactly as necessary, which is the usual need in a polyomino game, to be efficient, right? Sometimes you want to be inefficient, but it can be tricky to figure out how to be inefficient, or what's the best way to be inefficient in order to leave those gaps. And in particular, I want to mention, and this is something that I'm going to come back to, is the idea of the random goals. And if you look at the timestamps, you'll see there's a timestamp at the end that I talk more about this. So for now, I just want to say that this game, like a lot of modern games now, they have this idea of random goals where you guarantee some sort of variety game to game by changing the rules, right? Typically, and perhaps the most simply, you're changing your goal. So you're saying you get, X number of points, like in this game, if you do Y. So try to do Y, right? But next game, instead of Y, it's Z. So every time you set up a new set of goals, you have to sort of, have a look at them, say, okay, what does this goal do? What does this goal do? And, sometimes if you play like multiple games in a row, it actually can be hard to remember the changes, right? So the first time you set up the game, you have to learn those goals. And, okay, you might have to consult it back and forth, right? You're working, it's like, oh yeah, what does the purple drawer do? Okay, maybe by the end of that first game, you've internalized that. And so the second game, if you keep all the same goals, just play again. But again, there'll be that desire for variety. Well, if we're playing a second game, why don't we change up the goals, right? Change one out, change two out. And then you have new goals that you have to learn. And they're not complicated goals, they're not hard to learn, but there is a non-zero obstacle in the game that you're introducing where you're trying to remember even what the goals are from game to game. Because this game is different than the last game we played, remember. We just played that last game 15 minutes ago and there were these goals. Now we're playing a second game and now we have these different goals. And that effort, and you can think it's a small effort, but bear with me, that effort that you took in order to learn those goals, now you have to reset and you have to spend that effort again. And I'm not saying it's a big effort. I'm saying there is an effort. I'm not saying there's a big cost to that effort, but I'm saying there is a cost. For us, it was a fun diversion. We actually played the heck out of it for a day or two, and then we just felt done. Like, okay, we've seen everything, right? And no, you're not going to see every combination of goals in the same game, but in the end, that doesn't matter because the goals don't overlap at all. They don't interact. You're basically playing 4 simultaneous games in a row, and each game has a different rule set, like a different way to get a high score. So in the end, you play this a bunch of times, you've seen all the goals. Just because you have a different combination of goals in one particular game doesn't really have much of an impact on the game, I feel. So it is definitely a game where you can play it out and like you can play with it, you can have fun with it, and then you can be done with it. So I have a rating system now. It's how much I want to keep a game in my collection. Ranges from 0 stars, get rid of it ASAP, 4 stars, I don't see myself ever getting rid of this game. Junk Drawer is a 1-star game, which is a game that I will actively try to trade away. I don't mind to own it, I'll play it, but if I have to, decrease my collection size over time, right? And so what's going to sacrifice? I of course I'm going to keep my 4 stars and my 3 stars. So anything 2 or less is looking on the chopping block, and 1 star definitely. So I will be moving Junk Drawer on. I think we've seen all there is to see about this game. So I want to compare Junk Drawer with Tipperary. Tipperary came out same year, according to Board Game Geek. It's from designer Gunter Burkhardt and publisher Lookout. And Lookout has done a similar game to this with Phil Walker Harding's Baron Park, which is not simultaneous play, which Junk Drawer and Tipperary are. So this is a more direct comparison here. A very odd collection of polyominoes with all sorts of weird and crazy shapes. Some small, some large, and they're balanced because some of the squares have extra point tokens or other bonuses that you may have, so you may want to have the small ones over the large ones. In general, in Tipperary, you're trying to have as large an area as possible because you're going to score 1 point per square in your largest rectangle that you make with your polyominoes and your starting piece. There's points for completely surrounding your starting piece. That's a bonus 5. Some of the spaces have sheep on them. And when you combine sheep, you make a large flock. You're going to score at the end 1 point per sheep in your largest flock, but a bonus if you have the largest. You can put 2 bogs together and you'll get a randomized single square tile, which you can use to fill up gaps. You put 3 ruins spaces together. You're able to get, at the end of the game, a little tower, which you can use again to fill up gaps. Well, that's at the end, so you can figure out, like, okay, what's the largest rectangle I can make, and then use the towers to close that off, right, to finish the rectangle. There are ones that just give you straight up points, and there are ones that give you straight up extra sheep, which you can use to increase the size of your flock, assuming you have room on the pasture spaces, the empty spaces, in order to add sheep. And then there are also sort of brewery and fields, like farming fields. And whenever you put one next to the other, you'll move forward on a personal track, which will give you more points at the end of the game the further you make on this track. And of course, it escalates. So if you get very high, you're going to score a lot of points. But at regular intervals, as you're increasing this, you also get extra sheep, which you get to add in. So there's a little bit of interaction with all these things, a little bit of interconnectedness. Unlike a game like Fits or Take It Easy or Cities, a number of them, what I call the bingo style games, right? Everybody calls out a thing and everybody gets that thing and everybody puts down at the same time. No, instead there is I want to call it a turntable. It's a spinner. It's a spinner which has these prongs that come out that separate the area around the spinner into 5 areas, and each area will always have 2 polyominoes. And on the spinner is your symbol, which represents your town, which is printed on your starting piece. And every round, you spin the spinner, and wherever your symbol points to, that's pointing to a gap that has 2 polyominoes. You pick one of them to put into your play area. So everybody's playing at the same time, but still everybody's putting down a different polyomino. The other one stays there. You refill, so there's 2 in every gap, and then you spin again. And you just do that 12 times. So the tile you don't take stays there. It's random. You're hoping that, I'm going to put this tile down now because that's more important right now, but I'm going to keep the option open of getting that other one on a later turn. You might not. Another player may get it. Another player may get that lot of 2 polyominoes and still leave that one that you want. So I don't want to oversell it, but there is the potential bit of planning there, that you can pick a polyomino for now to pick and place and leave the other one and hope you have that opportunity to get it later. And you can always look at the polyominoes that are out and see, oh, I could be getting any of these on a future turn. It's a fun little puzzle. The polyominoes are very odd shaped. Almost certainly you're going to get 2 polyominoes and it's going to be like, what am I going to do with this kind of thing? Because of the conflicting goals, right? You'll want to have fields next to breweries and vice versa. You want to get a bog next to a bog. You want to get the ruined spaces. You want to get 3 in a row if possible. Again, you're thinking about your flock of sheep. So there are multiple considerations, and because the polyominoes are so strangely shaped, it creates a lot of friction. Just internally, of course, not much to do with the other players, but friction in your own tableau. You will be pulled in different directions. And in that sense, I actually find the game strangely addictive. The first time I played it, I was very negative about it. This was an in-person play, and it just felt like, what is even the point of this? It has since become my go-to 10-minute game to play on Board Game Arena. Everybody's got one, right? One game, it's like, I got a few minutes. Let's see if somebody's up for a quick game of X. And for me, X is Tipperary. And I have since introduced the game to my wife. You see, I have a physical copy. Introduced it to the wife. Works great, 2-player. It's not my favorite polyomino game. I still, some of those games, like I talked about recently, like Cottage Garden, like Spring Meadow, they're just a tiny bit more complicated than I'd like. Not so complicated that I am turned off. I'm not dumb. I can play a polyomino game that has a little bit of strange rules. I find that I need justification. Like if you're going to add complexity or a weird, unintuitive rule, give me a reason for it. Show me the need for it. Otherwise, I prefer it simple. I personally find that Tipperary is a good balance. It is odd. It is hard to play well, not necessarily because of any sort of depth per se. Although the more you play, definitely the better you can get at the game. That's the case with most games, including Junk Drawer. There is something that keeps me coming back to the game because it does have that sort of just one more game quality. It is a little bit longer than Junk Drawer, But once you learn the game once, you don't have to relearn it. You're just learning how to play better. You're seeing the importance of making as square a space as possible, making sure that your town is surrounded. You're seeing the importance of, if you can, I have a brewery, I can have 2 fields next to the brewery. Okay, I'm benefiting that twice. And now I have another brewery, which I can put next to those 2, right? And get that bonus twice in a row. You can do things like that. It's the polyominoes that keep you from doing exactly what you want. So there's a frustration, but it's a good kind of frustration. There are games like Junk Drawer that you play a bunch of times and then you feel kind of done with them. And I thought that would be the case with Tipperary, and it wasn't. It was a game that has grown on me. It's still not necessarily my favorite genre of game. I do like polyomino games, and I often like simultaneous play games just for their speed. Like I said, if we are not going to care what each other does, I'd rather we play it at the same time, because the game can just be over quickly. If we are each going to individually solve a puzzle, but we're going to sit at the same table doing so, that's fine, but why do we take turns? Why do I wait for you to put a word in your crossword, and then I get to put a word in my crossword, and then it's yours? I can't see your crossword. I don't know what you're doing. Let's just play at the same time. So if I'm going to play this type of game, I prefer simultaneous play. So which of these do I prefer? I gave Junk Drawer 1 star. Tipperary, I give a 2 star. Now I know you're thinking like, oh, that's not, super amazing rating either. It is a game that I am fine to have in my collection. I like the game. I will probably keep it because I've introduced it to my wife and she likes it. So it's an easy, quick game that we can play together. And maybe eventually we will tire of this one too, and then it'll move on. But in the meantime, we're still enjoying it. The reason I'm talking about these games, especially together, is I want to explore, and I haven't really planned this, like I haven't prepared a lot in advance of this, but I do want to explore the difference and why I in particular like Tipperary style more than Junk Drawers. There's a big difference between the two, and that is that Junk Drawer has randomized goals. Randomized goals are a very popular thing nowadays. It seems like whenever you have a remake of an older game, a classic game, the publisher decides we need to modernize it. It was good, but it was a hidden gem, Now we need to modernize it. We need to polish it and make it the best it can be. And for some reason, that always involves randomized goals. Sometimes even randomized rules. And randomized goals that are public, I don't really see anything really wrong with them necessarily. Hidden goals I am more annoyed at because unless there's a standard type of hidden goal, so I can, maybe there's only like 5 different hidden goals in the whole game, something like Metropolis. So I can intuit, and I know what all 5 are, so I can intuit based on what I don't have, that you have one of those 4, and based on your play, I think you have this. In general, I want to talk about variety for variety's sake. So some might say, in my example, 5 random goals in Metropolis. What about 20 random goals? What about 100 random goals? You still only use a couple each game, say. I think in modern hobby discussions, it is widely assumed that more is better. Here's a deck of randomized goals, which is good, it adds variety. And if you're going to have that random deck, why not make it as big as possible, right? That's even more variety. More variety is always better. That's the assumption. And I want to challenge that. This game has randomized goals. And on a surface level, it has variety. Because every time you play, you'll set up a new set of 4 random goals. And next time you play, it'll be 4 different random goals. And boom, variety. Variety is good, right? Well, why is, to me, Tipperary better and it doesn't have random goals? When you buy a game, especially on Kickstarter, but anywhere, if you haven't played the game before, you don't know how good the game is. You could buy it and then play it and think it's trash. And you can be convinced that the variety that is shown, that is included, in the game that is shown on the back of the box, or you read reviews and it mentions the variety, that will overcome it, right? Maybe I play this game once and the randomized goals are not very good and I didn't enjoy it, but I feel better knowing that could happen when I buy the game. Having randomized goals means that at least if I play it a second time, maybe the second time will be better. And it feels like it saves you a little bit from making a bad decision. Whereas if you buy a game like Tipperary and it turns out you don't like it at all, there's no saving it, right? You've seen the game, you know you don't like it. I mean, I didn't like it the first time I played and it grew on me. There is no variety built in to change the game from game to game. So if you don't like what the game is that first time you play, well, it's not a different game the second time or the third time you play. And when you randomize stuff, it is, even if it's just a tiny little bit. In particular, publishers really lean on this as a sort of a crutch to, especially, like I said, when they're doing remakes. I understand why publishers do it. You can't always reprint an old game that has middling ratings and just reprint it as it is with no changes and expect it to sell well. You have to sell people on why this new version is better. And even old people who liked the old game, you want to tease to them like, well, you have that game already, but this version might be better. So why not ditch that old one and buy this new one? And so I feel like there's like checkboxes. So what are some things we do? Well, we got to get Beth Sobel or Ian O'Toole to do the art. That's a given. Let's see, randomized goals. Maybe we'll have a thing where we change the rules every game, right? And this variety is presented as a selling point. It can be very useful for something like Kickstarter, where people are expected to spend money on something that's an unknown quantity. They don't know how good the game is, and the variety that is presented as a selling feature is a sort of a hedge against that, right? I understand why publishers present variety as a selling point. I'm just pushing back on the idea that it's always a good thing. You know, I've seen games that have a large variety of goals and they're so varied. Like, some of them are really interesting and some of them are just terrible and boring. And part of me just wants to say, why didn't the designer do this work for me? Instead of giving me 25 things, only 10 of which are interesting, just give me those 10 things and tell me to play with that every time. And if they're good, then I'll enjoy it and I'll keep playing. And maybe, who knows, maybe later on I'll buy an expansion and I'll get 10 more things. I don't know, assuming you put in the work to make sure they're good. But don't just give me 25, what almost feels like random stuff, and then tell me, just put it together in a mishmash and the game is now figuring out what's good and what's bad. And it's almost presented as if there is no downside to having this variety. And I definitely want to push back on that. If you have to learn new rules or new restrictions every time you play, that's not a big obstacle, right? You're smart, you can handle it. Maybe you find that interesting or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean there is no downside to it. When you introduce that randomness, you're introducing an obstacle, a very, very tiny little obstacle that keeps the game at this sort of superficial level. You're just only ever on the surface. It's so common now, and I'm kind of done with it. I'm kind of done with that sort of superficial variety. You know what, in Tipperary, the randomness of the polyominoes is enough randomness, honestly. The rules are the same from game to game. The goals are the same from game to game, and the randomness comes in these weirdly shaped polyominoes. And that sort of variety, I'm 100% on board with. But this sort of variety always leaves me wanting. Oftentimes I've found this, and that's one thing that I'm very much against I think the common thought process of a lot of hobbyists. I feel like a lot of hobbyists want every game to feel like their first game. That's the biggest difference maybe between a board game hobbyist and a person who enjoys board games but doesn't really consider themselves in the hobby at all, right? They're just casual players. Is that for the casual player, learning the game is an obstacle, But then once they learn that game, they're happy and they're happy to explore. Let's play that again. Let's next time we get together, let's play that game again that you introduced last time. Now that I know how to play the game, I can, enjoy it more. And the hobbyist, first of all, doesn't mind to learn a new game, but they seem to want the game to replicate that first game experience every time they play. And that's somehow a better experience. And I disagree. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have posted this, but hey, it was just something on my mind. Thought I'd try this kind of, rant / just, putting my thoughts out there and seeing if I can make something out of it. I hope I save this in editing. Thank you for listening and maybe watching, but listening. If you got this far, you listened to me, my goodness. Thanks for that, and take care.